Nearly 2 months before they begin defense of their title, the Los Angeles Rams receive their championship spoils on Thursday. Their Super Bowl rings. Now, the rings have removable tops that reveal SoFi Stadium's bowl underneath.
Oh, they stole that from the Bucs.
And hey, look at that. The Bengals got themselves on a ring there. In terms of the carat weight, they are the heaviest sports championship rings in history. According to the team, the rings have approximately 20 carats of white diamonds set on white and gold, marking the opening of SoFi Stadium in 2020. They are beauties. Now, Rams, one of the beauties of the NFC West, they are Super Bowl favorites, amongst the favorites, at 11-1. In terms of the NFC West, plus 135. They're projected for 10.5 wins. 49ers next, plus 180, projected for double-digit wins as well. Then it's Arizona at 3-1. And lastly, Seattle, 16-1, just to win the division, projected for 6 wins this season. All right, let's talk about these totals and what the NFC West could look like. And to do that, let's welcome back CBS Sports NFL analyst Ryan Wilson. Ryan, let's start at the top with the Rams. Matthew Stafford comes in and in his first season leads the team to the title. His numbers took a significant jump in 2021, almost 5,000 yards passing, over 40 touchdowns. So what are you expecting from Stafford in year 2 here in LA? More of the same or a bit of a step backwards?
So I have to take a moment to collect myself, Jeremy, because during the break we were talking about my 5th-year-old, and I need a couple Serenity Now deep breaths. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to channel that championship ring that the Rams just won, well-deserved, and I'm going to think positive thoughts. Come on, parents. So here's the deal. I think Matthew Stafford is going to be even better than he was last year. And he actually said a few weeks ago that he actually understands a lot more at this point in the process than he did a year ago, which makes sense because he's been in the offense, that Sean McVay offense, for a year now. He now has Allen Robinson to throw passes to. We'll see what happens to Odell Beckham, who tore his ACL in the Super Bowl, and where he ends up. But you have Cooper Kupp. It turns out he's pretty good. The offensive line is going to be good. They're going to have to replace Andrew Whitworth, but Joe Noteboom has been preparing for that role for a few years. And defensively, you got Aaron Donald, you got Jalen Ramsey, you got most of the players that helped you win last year. Bobby Wagner's a new addition as well. So I think the odds that we saw on the graphic just a moment ago are spot on as we sit here in the middle of July, in that it's hard to imagine any other team than the Rams right now being the favorite in that division, an incredibly tough division, except for maybe one team that we'll talk about in a second.
New offensive coordinator in Liam Cohen here for the Rams. Left the organization for a year. He became the offensive coordinator at Kentucky. They actually had quite a good offense last year in college football. Then he comes back to the Rams. Are you expecting any major adjustments with this offense or just little tweaks?
Little tweaks, and we know that it doesn't matter who the title holds the title of offensive coordinator. At the end of the day, Sean McVay is going to be dialing up those plays, and we've seen what he's been able to do. The only issue with Sean McVay is that he seems to not care about timeouts, and that drives football fans in general and Rams fans in particular crazy in late game situations. It didn't bother or hurt him last year or that team. Maybe he'll work on that. That's something he's been working on during the offseason. But at the end of the day, he'll be dialing up the plays, and we'll see Matthew Stafford probably be more effective in terms of completing those plays than we even saw a year ago. And that's something to be concerned about if you're one of the other teams in that division.
Maybe he could learn from you, Ryan. You have to take plenty of timeouts with a 15-year-old son in the house. The Cardinals have Kyler Murray locked up for the foreseeable future. Now Murray needs to prove that he can consistently win. The Cardinals lost 6 of their last 8 games last season. He has the deal, but is this a make-or-break year for Murray?
Might be a make-or-break year for Steve Keim, the GM, because I remember it wasn't that long ago that he drafted Josh Rosen in the first round, traded to get him. The very next year, he took Kyler Murray first overall. And Kyler Murray's been good, but not great. I think that's an accurate assessment of his performance as a quarterback in the NFL. He struggled with injuries at times. I don't think the height's been an issue for him. I know Prisco didn't like him for that reason in terms of seeing over the offensive line, but I think the bigger issue has been, and you noted, the lack of consistency in the second half of the season. That's not all on Kyler Murray, but when you're the second highest paid player in the NFL behind Aaron Rodgers, and Aaron Rodgers' trophy case looks a little different than Kyler Murray's, then the expectations are going to be all on you, fair or otherwise. Also a concern is that DeAndre Hopkins is going to miss the first 6 games because of the suspension. So a team that typically starts out pretty hot is now going to miss their second best player in DeAndre Hopkins, and then the same team that struggles over the second half of the season what's that going to look like? What are they going to do differently to make that not an issue? So those are my concerns with Kyler Murray. The good news, if you're Lamar Jackson or Lamar Jackson's agent, who is also Lamar Jackson, is that you're about to get paid, because there's no way you're taking less than what Kyler Murray made, given the success you've had. But that has no effect on what the Cardinals are going to do this season. And I think the pressure is obviously on Kyler, but the pressure may be even more so on Cliff Kingsbury, the coach, and general manager Steve Keim.
Yeah, outside of Murray, I mean, who else needs to step up this season for the Cardinals?
Well, they drafted Trey McBride in the second round. I think he has a chance to be a really good player at tight end. But how many tight ends are game changers that aren't named George Kittle or Travis Kelce? They have Zach Ertz. He will also help. They traded for Hollywood Brown. He needs to step up and pretend like those two guys, he and Kyler Murray, back in Oklahoma. A.J. Green's still on the roster, but I think his best days are certainly behind him. And Rondale Moore is another player who is small in size, but an absolutely explosive player who needs to have a big season to compete, again, in this incredibly tough division where we've seen the Cardinals start off hot and then they sort of stumble down the stretch. They have to figure out ways to win football games in December when they're trying to make the playoffs.
All right, the San Francisco 49ers officially Trey Lance's team after the Niners told Jimmy G that he can seek accommodations elsewhere ASAP. For all the guff Garoppolo took, though, I mean, he was actually pretty consistent here, Ryan. So how good can this team be with Trey Lance's QB1?
And that's a fair point, because I've given Jimmy G a hard time, but you mentioned the consistency, and his winning percentage over the course of his career among active starters is behind only some guy named Patrick Mahomes, Tom Brady, Lamar Jackson. So he's doing some things right. Now he has the players around him, but he's also executing. But again, the shoulder injury is a concern, and also the fact that they traded up to number 3 overall to get Trey Lance, because Trey Lance is going to be the starter. We'll see where Jimmy G ends up, but if Trey Lance scratches the surface on what we think he can do, this team has a chance to be really good. I know fantasy football preseason, they love Trey Lance for that reason. The running game is going to be an integral part of what they do, because that's what happens in Kyle Shanahan's offense. And now you have the added ability to have a quarterback who can run as well. You have Deebo Samuel, you have Brandon Ayuk, who was in the doghouse for part of last year, but hopefully he gets back on track. You have that running game, 4 or 5 or 6 running backs that can come out there and rush for what feels like 150 yards a game. I think if Trey Lance stays within himself, and I think Kyle Shanahan will do a good job of building the offense around him and not asking too much, this team can be just as good as it was a year ago, which was basically a dropped interception away from going to the Super Bowl.
Niners are second favorites in that division to win the division. All right, lastly, let's talk about Seattle. I'm not sure if they're just playing a game of chicken with fans and analysts, or if they just know something that we don't. I mean, I think we're going to go with Geno Smith and Drew Lock. You know, it's kind of one of those situations. What can they do at this point? What should they do at this point?
I think they're playing a game of chicken where the chickens are driving both cars towards one another. That's how crazy this game of chicken has gotten. Because, I mean, look, we see Geno Smith and Drew Lock there. Look, they're professional athletes, which is something you can put on your resume. After that, I don't know if you want them starting for your football team for 17 games. Now, Jimmy Garoppolo has been mentioned as a possibility. The salary cap is such that only team that can afford Jimmy G right now are the Browns, so maybe Jimmy Garoppolo gets cut and he ends up in Seattle. I think he's an improvement over these two, Geno Smith and Drew Lock, and Jacob Eason, who was also signed. But at the end of the day, we know that this team likes to run the football. They drafted Ken Walker III out of Michigan State in the second round to continue down that trend along with Rashad Penny, and that's part of the reason that Russ Wilson wanted out. They drafted 2 good offensive linemen in Charles Cross and Abe Lucas. They should help immediately. Again, 2 things that Russ Wilson wanted, but he had to leave to get it. But at the end of the day, if you don't have a quarterback, you're sort of hoping against hope that things work out. So I don't know how this plays out over the next 4 to 6 weeks, maybe even up to the trade deadline, which is usually late October. But I think Jimmy G would be an upgrade. After that, I guess you roll with Geno and Drew, and fingers crossed, hope for the best.
Okay, so Ryan, let's quickly just close with your order then, how you think they're going to finish. Rams, Niners, Cardinals, Seahawks?
That's it. I think that's exactly how it plays out. I think the Rams make the playoffs. 49ers have a chance. I don't think the Cardinals do it. It'll be interesting to see what happens to Cliff and Steve as a result. And finally, the Seahawks, they have a first-round pick next year, so maybe they'll be in the conversation for one of these quarterbacks in the upcoming class.
CBS Sports NFL analyst Ryan Wilson breaking down the NFC West for us. Thanks, Ryan. Always good to see you. Have fun with the teenage son. Training camp's getting underway, and so is our preseason training camp tour. Here's what you can expect in the days ahead. So today we're covering the Raiders. Then Monday and Tuesday, it is the Jaguars. Wednesday, looking at Tampa Bay. And then Thursday, Dolphins, Cardinals, all the way up until the start of the season. We have camps covered just for you.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.